Hello, I'm Jennifer Branch. Today I'm going to show you which watercolor washes to use when. Let's paint. The first is a basic wet brush on wet paper. All you do is wet the paper, drop your color in, and that's it. You really don't want to work it too much. The second is probably the brush stroke I use the most. Wet brush on dry paper. The third is difficult. Most people have trouble. You need to blot the brush at the reservoir, at the base of the brush, not the tip. If you blot it too much at the tip, you don't have any color. This is a very rough paper, which makes it easier to do a dry brush. And there's the very textured effect. Now, if you were going to use maybe a rigger or something, you could think about doing trees and interesting things like that where it has the hit and miss effect. Now, the real point of this video is when to use these washes. This is what it looks like if you're going to paint a basic sky wet on wet. Okay, so you get the paper really soaked, and then we're going to drop some colors in. This would be a very soft sky. Think either subtle color changes, not much detail at all, or in this case I'm going to do 3 sets of white fluffy clouds, and you can see how they look different in different washes. So I'm pulling the paint in, and now I'm going to pull out those white fluffiness of clouds. Just dabbing my rag at it. I'm blotting it. I'm not rubbing it at this stage. I'm going to stay very simple with these, just use 2 colors. Quinacridone Gold is the second. Now there's going to be a little bit more of ultramarine blue. You have to have those dark shadows, but see, the paper is still very saturated. So it's a very soft look. Kind of glowy. I would actually use this more if I'm just doing a gradations in skies, where maybe the top is a pretty blue and it goes to a sunset pink at the bottom. Pull out a little bit more color, and it really is that, because it blurs all over the place. You cannot get a defined line, and that's not a bad thing. You have a little bit of texture because of the rough paper, but not much. And the paint just flows everywhere as it dries. So almost zero control. Use a blotter a lot for very soft effects. As I said, usually the wet brush on dry paper is what I use the most because it allows more control. I actually have some more whites in it where I had to pull out every single white that I had in the wet on wet. This gives me a little bit more sparkle, a little bit rougher effect. Some quinacridone Gold, and see, it's flowing into the wet, but I still have my harsh line. Now I am going to want to blur that harsh line up a little bit. Pull some water in, move it around a bit. Little bit of scrubbing at it. But I still have those white spaces that I really don't have with the other, except where they were blotted, and they're a little dulled after they've been blotted. Not the bright, sparkly white. I use wet on dry for most of my paintings because it has a nice loose effect in a controlled area. Don't forget to blot the base of your brush for dry brush. Dry brush is going to be very sparkly and light on this rough paper. Leave lots of holes and gaps and texture. to layer dry brush properly, you really should let it dry in between layers. That way you're not getting the wet into dry or a wet on dry paper effect, or wet into wet. A little bit of blending in here. Now notice these three skies, completely different effects just on the type of stroke you're using. I would use the wet onto wet for a beautiful gradiated sky. I would use the wet onto dry for big white fluffy clouds, maybe a beautiful sunset with some backgrounds. And I would use the dry brush for maybe a dramatic textured storm where there's a lot of energy and action in it. And that's just the skies. With these three washes, you can paint pretty much anything you want to paint. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and please visit my website for more inspiration. Happy painting!